Hi, this is Becky Nunn, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can make a colorized resin, pour it into the bezel, and then put a splash of Jacquard PearlEx Powder over the top to create fun pieces like this. In the video I'll cover how to use a solid back bezel, like you'll see here. I'll also cover how to use an open back bezel. The back is all open. We put a tape on the back and then pour the resin into that. I'll also show you how to use it on a flat tag, a surface like this, how to create fun little post earrings, and also how to make fun little stacking rings. Here are some other colorized resin sample chips of what you can do, mixing different colorants into the Nunn Design resin and then using the PearlEx powder. So you have a lot of different choices that you can choose from when you're colorizing your findings. What you will need are some solid bezels. We have a Nunn Design. We're also going to be working with some open back bezels. There's a lot of different choices that you can choose. I think we'll try like a little itsy, because this makes super cute little earring drops. And then we'll try some of the open back bezels, that style. You'll also need to have some flat tags. These are the Nunn Design flat tags that we offer. And some stacking rings. So we're going to try these two designs in that. And I'm also going to show you how you can do this technique using a variety of different types of earrings. Whether you have a hook on it, like we're seeing here, I'll show you how to use those, or if it's just a post, and I'll show you how to use those. For starters, I'm taking a variety of the different techniques we're gonna cover. And we're going to want to clean these thoroughly with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, just to make sure that the surface on all of these items are nice and clean. Next, we're going to apply a little bit of tape onto the back side of these bezels, and I'm using a U-line, very thick packing tape that I like. So you can go ahead and pull off a little bit and use a pair of scissors to cut away. Place your tape onto the table and then place your pieces right onto the tape. I'll do one at a time. So on this one, just place it down. I'm not touching the tape with my fingers, and I'm just burnishing it down slightly. And then I'm going to come in and trim away this excess so it doesn't snag on my shirt or my hands or anything. So I have a little bit of extra that I can lay down and use for the second little piece. So place it down, burnish it, and then trim away the excess tape. Ooh. Now that I have the tape on the back of these, I'm going to go ahead and I applied a little bit of tape onto some business cards. This allows me to place my cards onto the work surface and then put my various bezels onto each of the cards, and this makes it easy for me to pick up the pieces and move them around without disturbing the resin. Go ahead and place your cards down, put on your little pieces that you just covered the backs of with tape, and then these are ready to go. Let me show you how you can prepare for your post earrings. I just have a piece of styrofoam that I got out of a box when it came with my packing supplies, and I just put a little piece of tape over the top of it and then just poke down all of my post earrings right into the styrofoam, and now these are ready to go. For the rings and for the earrings that have ear wires, I have a couple of blocks that I use, and these also have tape over the surface of them to prevent the resin from sticking to it. And you will take, depending on the width of your item, you'll take, like this one has a really wide base, and so I would mix this with something like this that has a wider base, because then I can stick those in that and have my ring in there, and all of these pieces will be level. But if I have smaller pieces, such as I do on these three, I would probably put these in a batch on their own, so make that ring, that piece right there, the opening a little bit smaller, and then I just press these down into there so they're nice and level, and then my ring will fit right in there too. So the purpose is to get this as a nice even surface, so when I pour the resin, if you don't put this tape on, you will literally pick up the block and have a bunch of wood on it if you have any overflow, which you will have, but with the tape it makes it super easy to clean out. Next we're going to mix the Nunn Design resin, the part A and the part B. So I'll need my resin, I'll need a mixing cup, I will need a mixing stir stick and some gloves. I also like to place down on my work surface a Ziploc bag. I just have a little piece of plastic that I like to place down, so if I have any overflow, it'll go right on that. And then I also will need to have some sort of timer so that I can time the amount of time it takes to stir the resin. So we're going to start to mix the resin, working first with the part A. We're going to mix it, pour it into the cup to the 1 tablespoon. You have to do a 1-to-1, and it has to be exactly 1 tablespoon of part A first, and then you'll do a second pour with part B up to the 2 tablespoons. So I put this level onto my work surface, open up the resin, and then I'm going to get down right next to eye level so that I can see very clearly when I've hit that 1 tablespoon mark. So I'm pouring, pouring, pouring. And then right when I start to get to that 1 tablespoon, I'm leveling out the bottle and it slows down the flow. And then I wait till I get right there, and when I get to that mark, I twist the lid and ended that flow, and I'm right at that line. So if I have any excess resin on my container, I can just use a wet wipe and clean that off of the lid, and then put the lid back onto the container. And now I'm ready to use the second part B. So this goes into the cup, filling it to the 2 tablespoons. So again, I'm down at eye level. I'm pouring, pouring, pouring. And when I hit that, or close to, I'll slightly change the flow. So it's just a little bit slower. And eke it up there. And then right when I get to that mark, I twist the bottle, double check, and I'm right at that spot. Take a different section of my wet wipe and wipe away that surface if there was any overflow before I put the lid on. And then you put the lid back on. And now those are ready to go for the next time. Then I have set a timer, and for 2 minutes I'm going to stir the resin. So I like to hold the base of the resin and then slowly start to stir. And you're going to do this for a full 2 minutes. And stop every now and then and scrape the side walls of the container, and then scrape the stir stick into the resin. And continue. So you'll do this for a full 2 minutes, and the resin will then be mixed, and you won't have any marbling of the 2 parts. After 2 minutes, you'll double check to see that the resin is all scraped into the side, into the container. And I actually have a little bit of resin that's spilled over the side. So if that's the case, you can just get a wet wipe and clean up your surface. I have a little bit on this edge here when I was scraping that. So you can wipe your cup down. And now you're ready to colorize the resin. For this video, I'm going to be making a color that is called Federal Blue, and it looks something like this. And I have these little cheat sheets that we've created that will tell me the formula of what I'll need in order to create that look. For colorizing the resin, I'm going to need, I like to use a little piece of plastic to place another empty cup in, and I'm also going to have some toothpicks. And I'm going to be pouring my mixed resin into the cup up to the 1 teaspoon mark on this cup, because the formula that I'm going to be using is based off of that resin being at the 1 teaspoon mark. So again, I'm going to get down next to the resin so I can see, next down to the cup so I can see that line, and then pour a little bit up to that one teaspoon mark. Now I'm going to be using my colorants. So I have Casting Craft opaque colorants, and it's going to take a little bit of each of these 4 colors to create this Federal Blue. So the first color on this formula is calling for 1 large, that stands for toothpick, of the white. So I'm going to take some of my colorant. I'd like to turn it up slightly upside down and squeeze it, and that brings up some to the surface. A little more than I wanted, but get 1 large toothpick of the white. Place that into your resin. I'm going to use a different toothpick. And next it calls for 1 large toothpick of the blue. So add that in. Next it calls for 1 large toothpick of the black. A little bit more. And now it calls for 1 tiny toothpick of the red. So the red is really, really, really potent. So I only need a tiny, tiny little bit of the red. Let's see how we did with our formula. You can always come back in and add some more. So with a clear stir stick, I'm going to mix my colorants together. I'm pretty close to my original color. Let me just take this out of the bag and I'll show you. So we're pretty darn close to the original Federal, it's called Federal Blue color that we're going to be working with for this particular piece. Since I didn't need to alter any of my pigment, I can go ahead and move these aside. If I had to add more of any particular color, I could have done that with those pieces. And now I'm going ahead and putting the right colors of each of these colorants back onto their bottles. So the white had a lot of excess on it, so you might want to take a wet wipe and just wipe off the surface of that really quick before you put the top back on. And now we are ready to move on to the next step of pouring it into the bezels. So let's bring down our first bezel. Use a toothpick. And I'm just going to pour some of the resin into the base of the bottom half of this. I'm going to move my chair so I can see this better. And then just place a little bit of the colorized resin right down into the base onto the tape. And I tend to like to go slow because it's easier when you're first starting, so that you don't have a lot of overflow, or if you don't get a lot of the resin onto your bezel. And then as you build up confidence and speed, then you can add quicker. Once I put enough in there just to kind of feel the base of it, I grabbed another toothpick, and I like to hold this one side down with the toothpick and then use the other toothpick to come along these outside edges of the bezel, because that's where bubbles, air will get trapped on the tape, between the tape and the bezel. So I'm just going down inside of there and agitating to make sure that there's not any bubbles trapped down inside of there. Then once I have that pretty much gone over and covered, I have actually a little teeny bit of resin that I got on the side here, so I'm just gonna dab at that and pick that up. And now that I have that in there, I'm gonna go ahead and pour just a little more resin. Zoom in here so you can see this better. And add a little bit more resin, bringing this up to the kind of a level. Right now it's concave, so I'm wanting it to be nice and level and flat inside of the bezel. I'm not going for a high dome look on this one. I'm just wanting it to be nice and flat. So once I have that, I can go back in, and you can see that it's kind of created a little bit of a, I don't know how to describe it, but just go along in here and kind of just make sure that this surface is nice and smooth. All right, because that's how you do the open back bezel like this. For a flat tag, let me show you how you do this. So on the Nunn Design flat tags, you'll see that there is a surface that is kind of curved. I'm using the back side, it's nice and flat. And this is ideal for if you have a metal stamping that you made an error on or something, you can cover it up with resin. So I've already cleaned this, and now I'm going to just drizzle a little bit of the resin right on the surface. So start out by putting some resin down onto the tag. And then with my toothpicks, I can use 2 toothpicks to move these around. I'm going to drag the resin over to the sides. And this resin is a doming resin, so it basically just wants to know where the edge of the flat tag is, and then it'll stop right at the edge. So when I get to these hole areas, I'm going to be a little bit careful. I'm actually wanting to have a round toothpick for this, and I'm going to just drag that resin right over to those side edges. If for whatever reason you have some of your resin go down inside of the hole, let me show you how we're going to take care of that. So I'm going to intentionally fill that with resin so you can see. So now that hole is filled with resin. And in order to get that out, what you'll need to do is you can pick it up or move it slightly, but you're wanting to break the contact of that resin in that hole. So I'm just slightly picking it up and moving it. So I left that excess resin over there. Then you can take your toothpick and kind of just pop it. Get that resin out of that hole. See? And now I don't have any resin in that hole anymore. And I can just slightly move it back and up into that corner. So this will pull away from the surface, from the side edges, and will be a little bit lighter in color, but I really like that look. All right, so that's how we do the flat tags. Now let me show you how to do the rings and earrings. So for the earrings, we have our piece. We have our post earrings placed inside of the styrofoam. And I'm going to actually use a toothpick to drizzle this resin in because it's such a small quantity that you'll need. So just pick up a little bit of the resin with your toothpick, and I like to swirl it around to get even a smaller amount if I have too much, and then just place it down into the bezel. I'm just kind of going in with my toothpick and doing those bottom edges, because again, that's where the resin will, I'll have air bubbles in the resin. So I'm just agitating it to let it go. So on this, you can make it a little bit more domed if you want. Before we put on the flakes, put on the mica, the PearlEx powders. And we'll start with just these triangle ones. put a little resin in, and go in and agitate that base to make sure that that resin there's not any air bubbles in there. And then just drizzle a little more resin on there to bring it up to equal amount in the doming. All right, that's how you do the earrings. Next, show you how to do the rings and these little earrings with the posts. And very similar to how we just did the earrings that had the styrofoam. Just zoom in here a little bit so you can really see this. I'm going to take the resin, make sure that my surfaces are nice and level, and then just pour a little tiny drop. Making sure it's nice and level. Now you can see how to do that. Typically, once I pour that resin in, I don't like to move this because it's super easy for that to, those blocks to come undone. But the last one we have to do is just our regular bezel. Let me show you how easy this one is. So we have the bezel. It's already been cleaned, and go ahead and pour the resin right into the base. Once you have the base filled, take your toothpick. Again, I like to use 2 toothpicks, and I like to turn the card itself without getting my fingers near the resin. So once you have the base filled, I'm just going along those outer side edges, because again, the base and where it's that 90 degrees angle, that is where I have the most challenges with air getting caught in there. So I'm just using my toothpick to go in and just agitate it really quick before I apply more resin onto that surface. Depending on the look that you want, you could dome this, or you could make it nice and flush. So I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about, but let me see if I can show you. I can see that this is, there's like an edge on the inside here that makes this not nice and smooth. It's kind of like a little stitch mark. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's where the tension of where the resin is meeting that side edge. So another thing that you could do if you wanted to dome it, let's just show you how you dome it. You can take the resin and you just pull it over to these side edges, and then I'll cut that, that little tension that I was describing. And then we're gonna pour a little bit more resin on here, making this much higher dome. And we're actually gonna go all the way over on those side edges. I'll show you what I mean. So you can't see that silver as much on that side edge. See what I mean? Now we can just make sure that we pull it over to those sides. For you beginners, the doming of the resin super high like this, you have a lot more opportunities for spillage. So just know that if you do add a lot of resin and you have it a nice high dome, you have more of a chance of it spilling. All right, so now that I have my resin in the piece, we're going to be looking for any kind of air bubbles that might be in the resin. So to do that, what I like to do is I'll take this off camera and I'm gonna huff with my breath, and my warm breath will make that air, if there is any trapped in there, expand and pop. So you want to do that for your various pieces. This one's been sitting for a little while. Looks good. If you want to, you can add a little bit more, because you can see it's kind of a little bit concave. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a little bit concave, so I could add a little bit more resin. Got stuck on my finger. Eesh. And let's see how we did. Here's this tag. So we have these three now, ready for our next step. So our final step is going to be actually adding the PearlEx powders right onto the wet and uncured resin. So what you'll do with this is you'll have your PearlEx powder. We'll go ahead and open up the container of that, and then with a clean toothpick, you go ahead and pick up some of the PearlEx powders, just a small tiny amount, onto your toothpick. You can kind of tap it till there's just a tiny amount, and then you'll bring it over to the surface of your wet resin and just kind of tap on it. And it'll create an interesting little splash design. If you want a little more, you can go in and add tap or two more to kind of give it a couple little more accents. I'm going to do it for the others as well. Let me show you applying it to the little itsy earrings. Ooh, got a lot on that one, but that's gonna be okay. Just go ahead and let it sit. I'm actually going to put my toothpick under the base of this one because he's just not seeming to want to lay flat. So go ahead and remove it from the paper. That's why it's really nice to have that plastic on there because it removes really easily. Then you'll need a pair of needle nose pliers. You just grab the resin and just peel back and it'll just come right off of the bezel. So I'm at about, this is close to 24 hours of the resin curing process, and it just peels, it peels right off of the bezel. And then if you have any excess, you can also go in with like your fingernail and just kind of, there's like a very thin layer on this back side that kind of bled over. You can clean that up just with the edge of your fingernail or something like that. But you can see how the splash of the mica powder just kind of dropped in there. Let's take a look at the other pieces too. Here are the earrings that we did, the little post earrings that we did on the little, that we stuck in there. And you can see, again, I don't know if you remember, but there was a high mound of that. It just kind of sinks down in there and gives a nice finished look. So the mica that's on my fingers is the mica that's already on the pieces there. But you can get an idea of how each of these turned out. And the last one we can look at is how we did with our little, you can see some of that mica powder. You just get a wet wipe and you can just wipe that off. And these little guys. So on these, I'm not really all that happy with them. I don't like that it's that kind of that concave to look like this. So what I can do is put them back in, and I can put another hit of clear resin over the top of that to kind of give it a nice dome. And then I would probably be more happy with that. For working with the open back bezels, we put this tape on the back. So to finish this off, what you'll do is bend back the tape off of the piece, and the back side will have a little bit of that residue, see, of that tape still on there. So we're going to use a product to remove that. So go ahead and put it onto a card or a plastic surface, and we'll do the next step. To remove the stickiness, I'm using a product called Glue Gone. And I'm going to just put a drop or two on the back side of this, and then you let it sit for, it says 2 minutes on the instructions before you start to use a tongue dip pressure to scrape it off. After it's sat for about 2 minutes, you can come on in and just scrape on here. You can see it just comes up really easily. Just that little gooey substance, that little residue just comes right up. And then you'll use a wet wipe to go in and clean up the surface on that. And that residue is off, and you have a fun little piece. On the back of this one, I don't know if you remember, but we had some overflow when we moved it. So you can see that there's just a little bit of overflow on the back side of this. You want to go in and, like a fingernail, you can just pick at that and remove that. That is how that piece turned out. So we have that, this, and this. We made some rings. We made some earrings. We're going to go back and put a little hit of resin on these to kind of bring it up to a nice dome surface. And we're also creating some fun insies.